What happens when the world gets turned on its head? We're forced to look inward, perhaps become fearful, sometimes lash out at others. While there are others in the world who don't give up hope because they believe in people. Join me, Kevin Tibbles, and Amy Goldberg for our new podcast, Believe in People, where we meet those who don't give up hope.
Hello, and welcome to this week's edition of Believe in People, a place for hope. Today, we're going to meet a man whose hope for the future of the planet has taken him out of retirement and into the world of activism.
Nick Decarlo is 75 years old, and so what? He's on the front lines fighting climate change today, just like he was in the 60s and 70s, working for the civil rights movement and campaigning for peace. And he's encouraging other baby boomers to join him.
Nick, welcome to Believe in People. We're thrilled you're here.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
Well, Nick, on your website, Seniors for Climate Action Now, love that title, it says, we refuse to despair, we have hope, but hope takes work and requires action. What sort of action are you taking?
Well, we started just a couple of years ago now, and we have concentrated on webinars in the period of COVID, on webinars, on educationals, attending demonstrations, mobilizations. And in that period of time, we've expanded our numbers pretty dramatically. And now we want to move towards more community-based kind of organizing. And that's what we're working on moving toward. And that means organizing people where they are and linking the climate crisis to issues that they experience.
You were involved in the environmental movement, civil rights movement, those sorts of things when you were a younger man?
Well, yeah. When I was young, the first thing that got me involved was the civil rights movement. And then later, the Great Boycott and various other student movement, anti-war movement. And then from there, I worked in unions for most of my life.
So I guess what I'm interested in is there isn't a sell-by date on activism. Is that what you're telling people like me?
Well, there is, but I don't like to think of it. No, there isn't. I mean, I guess I feel like, the situation, particularly with regard to the climate, is so critical that I don't feel comfortable standing by and not being part of a movement to do something about it.
And when did that happen for you, Nick? I mean, you retired and you worked with the unions. Is that sort of just give us a little bit of background? Okay,
so in terms of the environment, the first experience that really brought me to thinking about the environment in a very active way was in 1987 when we had a major battle in our workplace over health and safety. People were affected by carcinogens. A number of people died. People were getting sick. We had a major work refusal, went on for months. And out of that, we were able to ventilate a lot of the materials that we worked with, the gases, et cetera. But the question then arose, well, where are we ventilating it to? And it turns out, of course, it's right outside the factory gate into the environment around it, into the community. And it was at that time that I first read a book called Matter of Survival by David Suzuki, where he talked about the climate crisis. And the connections began to be really clear between health and safety as an issue for workers and, of course, the environment as an issue for the whole population. And that's when I first began to be active in environment. I set up and worked with a group of people. An organization we set up was called Greenwork Alliance, and it was an attempt to build a movement to reopen closed plants and make them, because plants are closing at the time, workplaces, to have them do environmental production, solar water heaters, particular types of glass, low energy appliances, et cetera, as a way of both addressing jobs and the problems of the environment. So ever since then, I've been involved in one way or another until I retired.
And so, Vic, Nick, so then I noticed on your website, you are recruiting people. And what I think is fascinating, because there could be a misunderstanding that you need to be aware and or well versed in climate change or climate in order to sort of take part. And I don't think that's the case as it relates to your organization. Could you share that a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think what you'd have to be aware of is that the climate crisis is real and that something has to be done. Beyond that, people learn by what they do. What we want are people and people are joining, who have a lot of experience over the years, but not so much around climate issues. But they're joining because they've realized how bad the situation is, how urgent it is. And so they're talking to their neighbors and they're ready to go out and organize. They're participating in demonstrations and they're learning as they go more information about the environment. We have some people who have been in environmental movement for decades and a lot of people who are just for the first time getting involved in environmental issues.
Do you interact? I kind of went away there for a second. Do you interact with younger people in the movement? And I guess what I'm asking is, I have been kind of conditioned to have to deal with phrases like "okay, boomer" and things like that, almost as if you're perhaps being discounted because of age. And yet age, in my book, also equals experience in a lot of places. Do you find that you have been able to build relationships with younger people in a movement that, let's face it, at the end of the day, affects all of us?
Yeah, I think we can and we do. And, it's not to say there may be a sentiment among young people. I think the strongest sentiment among young people is actually despair, interestingly, common with the older generation as well. Despair in the sense of how are we going to stop what's happening? But we've had a very positive response when we participate in demonstrations. We're part of a Fridays for Future Coalition organizing a demonstration this Friday. And the response is like somebody came up to me in the demonstration a week ago and said, this is a young person. You give me hope. What you guys are doing is what gives me hope. Otherwise, I don't know if I would have hope about change. So the message we're trying to get across, and I think that young people are receptive to, is that we, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, we are in the fight with you, the fight to change the world, because really we're talking about changing the world if we want to deal with a climate crisis. And yes, I think the response has been positive, but it's a big job ahead. And so, we've got a long way to go.
Yeah, and actually, Nick, to your point, how are you actioning things? I mean, I understand, you're providing webinars and you're doing, you're demonstrating. And how do you rally people and how do you organize and what are you seeing as the obstacles? And I imagine there are many.
Mm-hmm. Well, so as I said, we're learning as we go. So what have we learned so far is that there is a huge pool of talent among seniors who are interested and actually just looking for a way to be involved. And we have, we went from 20 people a couple of years ago. We now have 206, just in the last day or so, members. And so there's this huge pool of talent. And now our problem is how to apply that in very practical ways. So we're talking about working in communities. Let's give an example. So seniors are facing some of the issues around climate change, including heat. So last year when there was a heat wave in British Columbia, there were 600 plus people who died from the heat wave. A large number of those were seniors who were locked in, but isolated in their homes. And so issues like heat, anxiety, big issue, health care, which is related to some of the effects that people will suffer from heat, et cetera, and the lack, the failures in the healthcare system to deal with some of that. So we're going to make one of the objectives will be to do some education around those issues, around what it's going to take to address things like anxiety, and then organize people to work together. So the basic problem in terms of anxiety, I think, is two things. One is that there's only hope if there's a movement. People are despairing of and they feel that. How can I change things? What can we do? It's such a big problem. It's so huge. And so the answer we give is that if there is a movement, you can have hope. And in that movement, you can build some, and by taking action, as it was mentioned earlier, that's how you have hope. And then building that community and solidarity among seniors addresses the issue of anxiety. We also have policies we'll be fighting for to deal with issues of heat, for example, and how it affects seniors. So there'll be those kinds of organizing that we will do, we are beginning to do. And as I said, there's a long way to go. That's the kind of stuff we'll be working on. The other thing that our group members of our group are involved in is working with other environmental organizations, trying to build unity, trying to build common cause, so that the movement becomes more than a bunch of different organizations doing different things and becomes more and more of one common objective and common work together. So, those are the kind of directions we're headed in, but we're learning as we go, and it's going to take a bit of work yet.
You were just talking a little bit about anxiety there, and it's very interesting. Amy and I had a guest on a couple of weeks ago talking about children. She was a child psychologist, and she was talking about a lot of the anxiety that children are going through these days, and she mentioned the weather. She mentioned that climate change is affecting our school children at a very young age. You're talking to us about anxiety with regards to an older population. This obviously is becoming a topic that is, pan. It is across all sectors of our life and is affecting all of us. And, frankly, anxiety is something that can't really be dismissed as just fretting about something. It is quite a serious issue.
It is. And, when I got involved for the first time with Fridays for Future in 2019, when they, helping them organize demonstrations, we had a meeting of marshals, and a number of them were young people. And several of them said to me, I don't plan to have children because I don't want to bring children into the world that they're facing today. So, and I've talked to people who teach in universities. One person told me, again, a couple of years ago, they've been doing a teaching assistant for 5 years. And in that 5 years, they had noticed a decided increase in anxiety among the students they were working with. It was visible, it was clear that it was intensifying. And of course, the thing about the climate and about the environmental problems in general is they actually are existential threat. They actually do raise the question of what kind of future are we going to have on the planet. And of course, that's going to create anxiety. And I think a lot of people are aware of it. I don't think it's, even though people may not have a lot of deep education around environmental issues, I think a large number of people are aware of the problem, and they just don't know what to do about it. And of course, that's a factor in anxiety as well, because they don't know how to address this problem. It's not just that it's there; they can't do anything about it.
And that's where you come in.
That's part of us and many other organizations and many other people. It has to be actually a much broader movement that we're capable of building on our own, but we hope to contribute to it.
And it really is that you're contributing to the greater good. And I think, Nick, you mentioned something. I think when we think about climate change, we're so insulated to the idea it's one thing, but in fact, it isn't. As you and Kevin mentioned, it's really about our mental well-being, our emotional well-being, our physical well-being. I mean, there's so many aspects of it. So you've also noted that I'm fascinated by the boomer activism rise. What is that? Was that time it's enough already and I need to take action, or what was missing from all of that?
Sorry, are you referring to the activism that we're specifically involved in, or more generally in the boomer population?
Well, I'm specifically interested in what you're doing, but also, I guess the point number 2 is to the greater good.
Well, so one thing I've observed is that among people who are retired, there's a large movement to become active in some form, either personal hobbies, traveling, other ways. There's also a growing awareness of the future. There's a real concern about the future, about grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and kids. And so it seems to be those two things come together in terms of seniors being active. In fact, anyway, people put off other things that they might like to do in their retirement for the sake of addressing the climate issues. So I guess I feel that they're among the senior population. This is a population that grew up and has seen the changes. It grew up in a time of hope, and we feel like we're in a time of despair. And I think that's a factor in why people become more involved and want to do something. They're looking for some way to address some problems. They don't feel that comfortable just enjoying their retirement and leaving the rest of the world to solve its problems.
Mm-hmm.
I would assume it also means that people want to participate in something. People want to make a difference. And, if we are talking about seniors, people have grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Perhaps they want to serve. Are these the sorts of responses you're getting?
Absolutely, the kind of responses we're getting. That's probably the number one issue that people talk about, is their concern for their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren. It's not the only one, because they also feel they feel an attachment to the world around them, and they feel the necessity to act even in the immediate, never mind the future. But yeah, that's what people are responding to, and we're actually surprised by the quickness with which we're growing. We also have, as we grow, we have to learn new ways of operating, and going from an organization of 20 people to an organization of 200 requires some change and some development. But we are pleasantly surprised by the number of people who want to be involved, by the quality and experience of those people, by the discussions in which the discussions they want to have, and the creativity they're trying to apply to the situation.
And, interesting you say that, Nick, because I guess with that, so people are wanting to participate. They want to belong to something. They want a community. And I like that you're building these out into the community. But there also has to be that sort of satisfaction in some wins. So where have you seen some of the, because we're looking at despair, where have you seen some of the successes, and even the smallest success?
Yeah. This is a constant question. Where do we look for success? And it's when people say you can't really present all bad news. The problem is, it is bad news. And that's the reality. The news is bad. The situation is getting worse very quickly. We already see, in terms of what's happening in different parts of the United States and Canada, and in particular, most recently in Pakistan, where a third of the country is underwater. We already see the effects of climate, and we're not even near the numbers of the amount of carbon in the atmosphere that the Paris Accord talks about. Yet we're so short of that, and already we're seeing these problems. There is the danger and likelihood of runaway greenhouse gases that start to happen once you have things like the permafrost melting and releasing methane into the air. Methane being much stronger greenhouse gas than carbon. Things that then that in turn affects other things. So there's a danger of runaway tipping points where things start running away and we can't control it. So the news is bad. So what are the victories? Well, you can see that there are possibilities by some of the things that people are able to do and demonstrate. For example, renewable energy. But it's not enough, because it isn't being applied in an effective way to address the crisis. We still are increasing our greenhouse gas emissions 30 years after the whole world got together. Nations around the world got together at Rio in 1992 and said we must act to stop climate change. We are still growing our emissions since then. So the news is bad. So the only argument we have for where there's hope is there's hope in the fact that people are starting to organize to do something about it. That we, as individuals, we are not alone. We can build a movement that can address it. And that's where hope comes from. And there are signs of hope there. I mentioned the example of how much our organization has grown in a very short period of time. I've seen in other environmental organizations who are starting to think about how lobbying isn't good enough. We start to have to find some ways to build more political pressure because things are getting worse and we need to take action. So you see hope and you see victories in that sense. We do not see victories in the sense that the world has taken this problem seriously.
You've mentioned hope several times just in this past answer. I mean, let me ask you, why haven't you given up hope?
It's a good question. I mean, it's a constant battle, and the reason I haven't given up hope is that because, well, there's two reasons really. One is that I have experienced what people are capable of when they're organized and when they work together, and that gives me hope because I know the potential that exists around that. And the other is I refuse to give up. I refuse to accept that we're not capable of addressing the problems we have. So it's in some sense it's a form of stubbornness, but it's difficult. I mean, there's times when one gets discouraged. But as I said, I know the potential is there. I know that people can and will respond. We have to be organized, and I also refuse to give up.
And we don't have a choice.
I don't think we have a choice. I don't think we have a choice but to take action.
Every week I sort of ask this question, but I'm going to ask it the way that we ask it every week of our guest, because our show is called Believe in People, and you've just explained the things, the benefits out of being organized with people. But we want to ask you, and that is, why do you still believe in people?
Well, what else is there to believe in? I mean, again, I guess it's my life and it's my history. I've been involved in organizing for 50 years or so in one form or another. I have seen people work together. I have seen changes happen. I've seen examples where, when there's a blackout, like electricity blackouts, and people come together and they start working together. I don't really want a life where that doesn't happen. I don't want to choose a life where it's me against on my own. I take care of myself. I don't care about anybody else. It's not an option for me. I just can't go there. And I've seen enough evidence. We like I said, we made major changes in the workplace where I worked because people joined together and did something about it. And I've seen other events over the years, the anti-war movement, different places where I've seen people who have extreme bravery in terms of putting their lives at risk in order to help others. So it's just clear to me in history and in personal experience that society only survived to the degree to which we were able to work together to make it better. And I've seen it. I believe it. I don't think there's much other choice but to go with that.
So it's okay to be a stubborn old guy?
I don't know if it's okay, but unfortunately, that's me.
Well, I think you're not alone in this world. You've already got 200 other people with you.
Yeah, and it's not just stubbornness, obviously, but it is a bit of determination, maybe the better word, not to take things lying down, not to accept the things, the problems as they're presented to us. We have a role to play. We have something to say. We're going to say it. There's a song that Phil Oakes, I don't know if you know Phil Oakes, but he wrote a song back in the 60s at some point. It was, "I am just a student, sir, and I've got something to say." And that's basically the sentiment that I have.
And that's where it starts, really the fact that you're, I was cut off for a while. I don't know why, but it was fascinating conversation. I find though that because you're rallying around this is the very reason why action happens. So you're doing something. The only way to go from thinking about something is to take action. And that's terrific. We really appreciate the work, and we've been looking at your website, and I'm really compelled to join you.
Thank you. Yeah, are there any age limits on there?
Yeah, you can't be dead. No, there's no
age limit.
That's good. Seniors are self-defined, and so if you think you're a senior, you're a senior. And there's no age limit. There's no, end of life kind of thing. So yeah, we have people who are, in their 80s and heading into their 90s. They're active as well.
Do you think we as a society are sort of doing ourselves a disservice by often discounting the contributions that seniors can make? Everything's about young and vogue and hip and happening, but really.
Disservice is one way of describing it. I think it's almost criminal. I mean, maybe that's too strong a word, but it's a real problem where old people are set aside and put in a corner, and at best, might have a nursing home where there's very little effective care, very little sense of involvement, very little respect, I guess. And in terms of generally in the more rural societies and earlier societies, the people who were aged were respected and were included in everything. In our society, unfortunately, it's moving in the other direction because our society is a pragmatic one. It's not built around social definition as much as it's built around markets, around selling, around being hip, etc. And those are all money-making ventures, and that's why they're promoted. Seniors, people who are older, are shunted aside, and that is really a big problem. And we're all going to suffer the effects of that. We're all going to be old one day, for one thing, but also society has a better quality when we take care of each other, when we respect each other. And shunting old people aside is a form of I guess discrimination, but also a form of creating divisions in society rather than bringing people together and enjoying the benefits of that. Never mind the wisdom that you talked about, because of course there is wisdom in people who've seen all the changes over the years, over the decades. That's clear.
And you're helping change that bit by bit. So thank you very much, and thank you for coming on and talking to us about how to be an activist. How to be an activist in your age, or whatever you want to call it.
You're inspiring. You're very inspiring, Nick, and we really appreciate it. This is the time. This is the time.
Well, thank you very much, and let's get out there and get something done.
Yeah.
Thanks, man.
Thank you. Take
Thanks.
care.
Well, that was a very interesting conversation, because I think a lot of people perhaps not only discount what seniors in our society have to offer, but perhaps a lot of people think that maybe seniors don't want to contribute anything. And in talking to Nick, what we're finding out is not only do they want to, a lot of his members are ready to get a placard and go out onto the street to bring awareness of these issues that could be the end of us all, Amy.
And it's so true, Kevin, because activism doesn't stop at any age. I mean, when you're fighting for things that are so important, and climate change is one of those actions, is very encouraging when Nick decides that their world is in despair and I am going to do something about it, and I'm going to rally around this with a community. And he's really developed something remarkable. So Seniors for Climate, or for Seniors for Action Now, Climate Action Now, check it out. It's they're doing some amazing work. And if you've liked this episode, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Believe in People. Thank you so much for joining us.
Bye-bye.